Hi guys, welcome to I believe it's our fourth Inside Uni live Q&A. This one is with humanities students, so that's subjects typically in the arts and the social sciences. Thank you so much for joining. So the purpose of this call is we just want to give you a chance to ask, I don't know, some of the questions you might have about day-to-day life with humanities subjects, or a bit about how people learn about their subjects, how they came to apply, and really just have an informal chance just to chat to some students and ask them some questions. What we're going to do is we'll start off the call by just introducing who people are, and then we'll come on to talking about the questions you want. And if you've got more broad questions about non-humanities subjects or other aspects of life, feel free to ask them, because we'll use them to shape the future Q&As that we keep on doing. So if you want to send any questions, just feel free to use the live chat, which is available on YouTube. And certainly at the start, if you want to say what subjects you're interested in, or maybe where you're watching from, because then we can talk about those things a little bit more. And yeah, we'll also have a moderator in the comments. That's good. Well, that's Tommy, and he'll be saying hello as well. So before we go on to explain who's on the call, I'm just going to do a quick overview of what Inside Uni is. So Inside Uni, we're the people hosting this Q&A. So I guess you have seen our name. And we are a non-profit website set up by a group of students at Oxford and Cambridge. And what we do is we crowdsource application advice or things that people wish they had known when they were coming to apply to Oxford or Cambridge, and we put it on a free website. We've got one section of the website which looks at subject-specific advice, free resources people used, and any support schemes that exist. Many of them are non-profits as well. And the other part of the site is we've just emailed a bunch of students saying, hey, could you talk a bit about your interview, your application, what you used to prepare? And about 1,700 students have got back to us, and now all of that is for free on the website. So we'll introduce who's on the call. I'm Akil, I'm a fourth year Cambridge student, and I'm just going to be a chair on this call.
Hi, I'm Duarte. I'm a first year studying PPE, that's Philosophy, Politics and Economics at St. Peter's College, Oxford.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm a first year studying Hsps, which is Human, Social and Political Sciences at Cambridge University.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm a second year English student studying English, obviously, at Lady Margaret Hall, Oxford.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm a first year studying law at Cambridge.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm a first year studying history and economics at Oxford.
And I'm Casper, and I'm first year as well, studying architecture at Cambridge.
Awesome. So to start off, we're just going to do, three of us will do a day in the life about the sort of things we get up to. But certainly if there's any other subjects you want to know about, feel free to just message us in the chat.
So my usual day in the life, not when I'm in a lockdown, usually starts around 7, 8 a.m. I wake up, I get ready and I go to breakfast in hall. Then I usually leave for lectures or a morning tutorial. I come back to get lunch or just grab something on the way if I'm in a hurry. The afternoons are usually spent in the library getting some work done or going to some society events if there's some interesting talks going on. Then back for dinner, and afterwards, if I have something to get working on, I go back to the library for a bit, or I go to the college bar, get a drink with some friends to finish off the day, and that's pretty much it.
Hi.
Sam, did you want to mention stuff?
Yep. Okay. So hi. So on a typical day, I tend to get up and make breakfast in the kitchen rather than going to the buttery. I then tend to go to the law faculty, which is where I have my lectures, and I'll usually have somewhere between 1 and 3 lectures a day. And then after that, depending on what time it is, I'll either have lunch at the faculty, maybe meet up with some friends, or like come back to college and make lunch in my kitchen and have lunch there. In the afternoon, I then tend to either play badminton if it's one of the days that's going on at my college, or not. Then I'll sometimes just hang out with friends in the kitchen or do a bit of work in the library, just depending on what my essay situation is that week. And then in the evening, I'll sometimes go out to the college bar or out to the pub quiz or something like that. or if not, then I'll try and do a bit more work. Again, it depends on what I've got on that week. Yeah, that's pretty much a typical day.
So for me, for architecture, we don't have lectures every day of the week. So sometimes I'll be up fairly late, so sort of 8:30, and then I might have a lecture. And on other days we have studio days. So our studio space is in our department and dedicated for model making and drawing and all the kind of coursework. So I end up spending a lot of my time in our studio space. So I make my own breakfast, make my own lunch, make my own dinner, and often spend a lot of my day just in that space. But it's quite chill, so it's not like working in a library all day. And then so I often eat my lunch in there, my dinner in there, and stay late. And then once I'm done, I'll go back to college, catch up with all the people I know, and maybe go out, go for a drink or something like that, and then repeat, I guess.
Good stuff. Thank you, guys. So we're going to move on to some of the questions that we've had submitted in advance. But certainly, if you've got more questions you think of as we're going through these, please just send them to us via YouTube, and we'll talk about them too. So to start us off, we're going to have Katie.
So the first question is it hard to structure a day without many contact hours? And it's not necessarily difficult, but it does require some pre-planning. So often I try to like make lists of what, like a to-do list of what I have to do that day. And I kind of like make sure that I get out and I get to a library, and I kind of use that to structure my day. I almost make up my own contact hours, but like just with myself in the library. So make up certain hours I have to do certain things on my to-do list.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of that. I think by the time you know what lectures you have to go to, what essays you have to do, and various other commitments you might have chosen to have, your days end up filling up, especially if you want to leave time to have lunch with a friend or have a drink with someone or do some sport or exercise. It becomes fairly easy to work out, I think, once you've worked it out and got over the initial panic of the work.
Yeah, so somebody's asked, how did you prepare for interview? So one of the most important things is just sort of talking about your subject with various people. But then specifically, I tried to sort of look at the things I'd said in my personal statement and in my written work and think about how questions could be asked about those.
Yeah, same actually for me. I just went over my personal statements. I checked out the books that I'd mentioned that I'd read and actually made sure that I knew some details about it if they were to ask me. And for BP, they put some emphasis, at least what I read online, is that they did put some emphasis on sort of current affairs and politics and stuff. So I tried to keep up to date with that. That actually turned out not to be the case, but it was good preparation nonetheless.
Hi, so someone's asked, what do you do in your spare time? So what I do in my spare time varies. So some of the week I'll do badminton. There's casual days that my college does that. Art's one of my favorite hobbies, so I tend to do quite a lot within my college art society. We have like events for fun, and we also do quite a lot of just sort of chilled sort of art sessions, which is really doing some more law related stuff in my spare time. So sometimes I'll go to like debates or law events. So yeah, pretty much a bit of a variety, and like I have time to like sort of work into my schedule, so that's quite nice.
So on that as well, I do a lot of kind of art related events, creative events. So I like going to live drawing. I know my college and a lot of colleges, they do free live drawing like weekly for students at the college and for some external students as well. And then also I'm an ENTS officer. So ENTS is a Cambridge term for like events / entertainment. And so I spend a lot of time also helping to run events and organize events for both in college capacity and for ArcSoc, which is the Architecture Society in Cambridge.
So somebody's asked, are there any international societies? So there are lots of international societies, sort of from countries all over the world, but specifically I'm a member, well, I've attended lots of events from the Welsh Society, Dafydd, and the event sort of, there are some dinners, but then there are also sort of all getting together to watch sports matches, which your country is involved in.
Yeah, at Cambridge we have quite a few international societies. So like just off the top of my head, I know we have the Polish Society and the India Society, and particularly India Soc is really popular, and they do a lot to team up with like nightclubs, and they do like nightclubs out, and they do like Bollywood nights, which I know are quite popular with some people.
So the next person's asked, how did you decide on your subject? And for me, I was very unsure what I wanted to do. So for A level, I did maths, physics, and design technology, and that's kind of an engineering base. So at that time, I was sort of looking at engineering, but I really wasn't that sure. And I think for me, the best thing to do was go to a university. It doesn't matter if it's Oxford or Cambridge or wherever. For me, this is at Manchester. And I went to the engineering talk, architecture talk, and I think I went to a few others just to sort of get a feel for the subjects. And that was the best way for me, because I went to the talks and I found that engineering wasn't for me and architecture was more appealing and suited me better.
I had a similar situation in the sense that I wasn't quite sure at first what I wanted to do. So I was sort of torn between a couple of different humanities subjects. So I kind of decided by, again, sort of going to sort of like masterclasses and lectures and things on the like different subjects to sort of work out which ones I didn't sort of enjoy as much. But I also did quite a lot of reading. So I got sort of vaguely related to law books and sort of read those to sort of see if I'd like sort of reading about it and learning about it. And also I sort of looked at kind of the sort of way that they sort of studied it and the sort of way the course was structured, because I found that actually I liked the look of law quite a lot because of the way it sort of combines being an essay subject with being a bit more, it's almost got like quite a lot of problems that you deal with, as if it's like, it's almost a bit scientific but not quite. And so I quite liked that because I liked that it sort of blended the two.
Yeah, so we've had another question about whether it's okay if you study sciences at A level. Definitely. I had a crazy time with my A levels. I swapped around quite a lot. I ended up doing biology, chemistry, history, and English. And I thought I was going to do biology at university for a long time. And actually, I think they probably strengthened my application, and they've meant that I have like a different approach to literature I read now. And if anything, it's been useful rather than a hindrance.
Yeah, I did sciences at my A-level equivalent here in Portugal. And when I started looking for a university, I actually thought I was going to do physics or physics and philosophy. And from then on, I sort of realized, well, actually, I like economics more than physics, and I ended up choosing PPE. But it's absolutely not a constraint or an obstacle. And I feel like it did help me in some parts with the economic side of things. But it can make it a bit difficult if you're very used to that quantitative background to do a lot of essay-based subjects. But it's more of an internal obstacle than something that the university puts upon you, I think.
So another question is, what surprised you most about your course or university experience? For me, this was mostly, I was really surprised about how accessible the reading lists were. I was kind of ready to be like completely out of my depth and not understand any of it, but there's tons of support on the reading lists and they're quite accessible. I also had I'm from a state school background, and I was quite nervous about how I'd be able to adjust to Oxbridge coming from state school, but again, it was very accessible. I didn't really have too many major issues with that, and it was quite easy to fit in. And my course was quite flexible as well, which I found with supervisions and stuff, in the sense of a lot of you could pick your own interests, especially with Hsps being such a flexible course as it is as well. And there's just on the state schools, there's so many state school kids at Oxbridge, you know, it has like the kind of reputation as a place of private school kids, and there are a lot of private school kids here, but there are still a lot of state school kids.
I think well, I was expecting at Oxford to have very old, scary tutors, and for the rest of the students to be really nerdy and we not to know like how to talk to them about normal things. But actually, pretty much all of my tutors have been absolutely lovely and so understanding whenever anything's gone wrong or I've done a bad essay. And also the friends I've made, actually, you know, they're all a bit geeky, but they are absolutely lovely and a lot of fun. Yeah, just to be clear, a tutor is the person who sets your work and who gives you one-on-one or two-on-one tutorials about your subject, probably every week when you write an essay on it. So they'll give you your reading list, and they'll talk about your essays with you and how to make them better. And they're the people, yeah, who will teach you for the specific paper that you're doing, prepare you for your exams. But they're absolutely great, especially at my college.
So somebody's asked a question specifically about how you prepare for the history aptitude test and how it is. So the first thing to be clear about is that the history aptitude test has changed a lot over the years, and specifically it changed for my year. So it's important to go to the university website and find out exactly how it's going to work for your year. So I was, in terms of preparation for it, I was quite lucky in that I was able to attend an open day, and there was a lot of discussion about how to respond to them, and there were some sessions sort of to help people out with there. So if you're able, I don't know whether it will be online now, but there are sort of videos from the university and various things talking about how to respond to the history aptitude test. And then you can find lots of past paper questions on the website relating to past questions from the history aptitude test. And it's just worth looking through some of those and trying to analyse the sources that are given. And then I think you can see some of the feedback that's been given in past years based on those. So in terms of sort of how I found it, I mean, it's basically, so when I did it, there was a single question which was about analysing a source, which is sort of quite a familiar skill for history. But what was really different about it was a very long source. So that was just something that took some getting used to, really.
The next question is, how do you write a good personal statement for HSPS when you can't apply for HSPS at other universities? This is definitely something I ran into when I was writing my personal statement, but Cambridge are quite aware that they know that this is a strange course and it's not exactly offered anywhere else. So they do understand that if you focus your original personal statement on a course that is offered at other universities. So for example, I wanted to study anthropology at my other university. So I did my original personal statement focusing on anthropology, and even though it doesn't apply to the entirety of the HSPS course, they really like seeing that you're passionate about what you want to do. And then if you use the SAQ, which I know comes after your personal statement, to really focus on how you like the interdisciplinary approach of HSPS, and kind of in there, the SAQ, which is the supplementary application questionnaire that you have to fill in. You can really focus on how it's interdisciplinary, and you can talk about more about what you like about the other areas of HSPS, but they are very understanding that they know it's a bit of a strange course.
Sam, we've just got a question in about law.
Okay, so someone's asked, what are the opportunities for networking with law firms and chambers at Cambridge? So there's a few different ways. So Cambridge has a career service, and so they, near the beginning of first term, have a sort of law careers fair. And so they have one which has a lot of solicitors firms, and then one that has quite a lot of barrister chambers. And so you can go there and sort of network with a lot of different firms. Throughout the year, they also have quite a lot of smaller events through the career service related to law, but also on top of the career service, there's also the Cambridge University Law Society, and they tend to have quite a lot of networking events. So they'll often host them at like restaurants and bars, and you can get like free drinks and snacks and network with various firms, and they'll put it up on Facebook so you know which ones you want to go to. And there's also just a couple like built into college. So like my college had a sort of mood thing and then they invited a law firm to come and see that, and then you can network with them over like the dinner afterwards. So there's like quite a few different ways that you can network with both law firms and barrister chambers.
So the next question we've got is, do you find you make more friends with people in your college or on your course? And is there a varied mix between like your college friends and course friends? And so for me, as I said, I spend a lot of time in studio, and that's a mixed space between all first, second and third year architects at Cambridge at least. And there's architects from pretty much every college. So I find most of my friends are from our fellow architects. So I'd say course, but I think that's mainly due to the nature of my course and spending time in the same space together. But I still have friends in my college, and I think the college system is a good way to make friends across like a uni level outside of your subject, because it breaks down from that sort of overall uni that seems like massive and you'll never meet anybody, into smaller chunks where you can meet people in your college and you've got something in common with them purely on that basis, even if it's not your subject.
Yeah, I agree. Your college is a great way to make friends, and that you live together and you all eat in a central dining hall if you want to. So that's a brilliant way to make friends. But also there are loads of opportunities to do stuff outside of your college. So English is a course where you are quite on your own quite a lot. Generally, if you do classes, they're within your college, at least at Oxford. But if you join in with a sports team, you don't have to be any good at sport, but it's a great way to socialise. If you join in with different societies, both societies to do with your subject and slightly odd things, that can be a fun way to get to meet people. And so, you get to know people and find more opportunities to socialise with different people and make friends outside of your college, which is definitely very possible.
So someone just asked how much maths is there in economics courses? And there is some, but it does depend on the module. So some have far more maths than others. Microeconomics, for instance, is much more mathematical than macroeconomics. But it's, at least for the first year, it's not anything beyond what you do at A-level. Perhaps it's an application of concepts you already have. And even if you don't have A-level equivalents, tutors do sometimes organize maths classes. So in my college, they did. And so they really do get the whole cohort up to speed. And I don't think the maths is a big problem for everyone. If you really like economics, don't let the maths turn you off.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we're both talking about this from the perspective of economics courses at Oxford, where the economics is only one part of your course. I would say sort of a lot of the economics is maths based, because economics can vary between universities in how much the maths is in it. And I think in Oxford and probably also at Cambridge, there does tend to be quite a lot, but there are ways to get around that if that's something that's difficult. So if there are lots of there are sort of general maths classes that are organised by tutors in your college for everyone, but then there are also catch-up classes across the whole university if people haven't done an A-level in maths or that equivalent, which is recommended but not required to apply to most of the economics courses. And then in later years after first year, you can choose your modules around avoiding the more maths-based ones. So just to be clear, like lots of what happens in first year is around sort of applying differentiation and that sort of thing. That's the sort of maths that we do.
So someone's asked, what are some good ways of preparing for architecture, given that you're not taught it at school? And this is a problem that I found as well. But I think it's important to bear in mind that they teach from the ground up. So they teach as if you've got no knowledge, because they know nobody has done some prior qualification in it. But I think the best way to kind of to push yourself and learn something about it and prepare is to read around the subject. So that doesn't have to be read like the whole history of architecture, because you get taught that, but it's read something that you're interested in, you're passionate about. So find your favorite architect or your favorite style and read about it and discover more about it. And then that's the sort of thing you can talk about at interview as well, because they're not expecting you to have a comprehensive understanding, but at least show kind of interest in a particular area rather than just trying to tackle it all head on and finding it really difficult.
Hi, so someone seems to have asked, how did you choose your college? So in my case, what I sort of thought about was what was important to me in terms of where I wanted to live. So just in terms of things like distance or facilities that I'd sort of prefer having in a college. Although they're largely similar, there were just like one or two things that sort of really stood out to me. So then I sort of narrowed it down based on that by like visiting their websites. And then when I had like sort of 3 or 4 in mind, I went to visit them on the open day and then sort of worked out from that which one I sort of liked more. And so I was just sort of considering things like, I like doing art. Is there anywhere that has like sort of artistic stuff that I might want to sort of go to and various things like that. So I think it's very like much what is important to you and then sort of working out on that, I guess.
I had a really similar method to Sam for narrowing it down. So I went on the website and I checked it out. But also it's really important to remember that even though you do choose your college, there's always the opportunity that you may get pulled. So we have 2 pools at Cambridge with the winter pool and the summer pool, which is when your original college that you applied to may not necessarily want you, but a different college may still want you. So you can get taken to a different college. So I was pulled. So your choice of college, while important, isn't the most like groundbreaking thing that you decide at Cambridge. It's more important what course you do.
And just to add a point there about the pooling system, so kind of as Katie was saying, the pooling system is designed if a college doesn't have, if they think somebody's really good but doesn't have enough spaces, then they'll kind of recommend them for other colleges. And something, so I actually got pulled as well, and I remember at the time it kind of messed with me because I thought, oh, maybe I'm not good enough to be here. But it's worth like remembering that even like a lot of people do get pulled and a lot of them will academically still do really well. So being pulled isn't necessarily like a personal thing. And between colleges, there are different facilities, but you can tend to get facilities at the university level, or if you, for example, like with me, I wanted to join a volleyball team in my final year and my college doesn't have a volleyball team, so I went to the college next door that did. So there is that flexibility to get involved with other colleges still.
The next question is, I'm stuck between HSPS and PP. Do you have any thoughts on the pros and cons between the two? So I study HSPS and I can't really speak for PP because I'm not really sure too much about it as a course, but HSPS, one of the pros that I found really is that it offers a lot of subjects and a lot of different subjects, and it's really, really flexible. So you have the original like 4 that are kind of represented in the acronym HSPS, but then you also have links with the psychology department, the archaeology department, biology and history, and I think economics as well. So it's really, really flexible. There's loads of choice and there's loads of links that you can make, so you can make it really personalized to you. But one of the cons, of course, is that there aren't really any numbers in it. I know that obviously the economic side of PPE has a lot of numbers in it. So if you are into numbers and statistics, although there are some statistics papers that you can take in 2nd and 3rd year, that's not really what HSPS is about. It's more about essays, from what I've gathered.
Yeah, PPE can also be quite varied in the sense that the 1st year is the same for every PPEist. From the 2nd year onwards, you really get to choose your options and you can be very specialized in something they really enjoy, or get a more broader approach to philosophy, politics, and economics. And it is slightly more mathsy in the sense that we do have economics in the 1st year, which we have to do. But you can drop economics after the 1st year, and you can do just philosophy and politics, which can be really just essay-based, normal humanities subjects. Or you can instead drop philosophy and do the more quantitative economics papers and the slightly more quantitative politics papers as well. And those are, by humanities standards, of course, slightly more mathsy, of course, not engineering level, but still. And I suppose the cons is that we don't get that many links as HSPS seems to have with other faculties or other subjects. We can do jurisprudence as a philosophy paper, that's in the law faculty, I think, and we can do something with economics, that finance, which is in the business school, but I think that's about it. So it is constrained to those 3 subjects, but within those you have a lot of choices and many options.
So we've had a question, do you have to do an aptitude test for English? And if so, how did you prepare? How was it? You do have to do an aptitude test for English at Oxford. I'm not sure if I think it's the same one at Cambridge, I'm not entirely sure. And I'm pretty sure it's still the same now. It's the English Literature Admissions Test, the ELAT. It has its own website, with last time I looked, with all the past papers on. So this is, you just get 6 texts. They could be poems or prose, and you have to write an essay on 1, 2, or however many of them you would like. My main advice for this would be anything for applying to English is just read as much as possible. So poetry and prose, and practice analysing it or thinking critically about it. And then my other piece of advice would be to do the practice papers. Obviously, there is a bit of technique to it, being able to choose how many texts you write about and how to do that quickly, and how to analyse text quickly. But hopefully it's just using the skills you've learned at school, at A-level, and putting them into practice. So I'd recommend doing some timed ones. And if you can find someone to have a look at them, give them a mark, that would be brilliant. If you've got a willing teacher or a teacher you can persuade to do that. But that would be my main piece of advice. It was fine doing it. It's just, if you like English, then it's just doing an analysis of writing.
So somebody's asked, how was the TSA and how did we prepare for it? So doing history and economics, I only did the first section of the thinking skills assessment, which is around sort of multi-choice reasoning questions. So with that, it's just really a case of doing some past papers, which tend to involve sort of some basic maths and reasoning questions and getting used to the format, which I found relatively straightforward compared to preparing for essays for the history aptitude test.
Yeah, for BPE, you have to do the 2 sections of the essay. And the first one is just like Jack said, it's just practicing getting past papers and doing them in some conditions, and eventually you get used to the format. And that's pretty much it. It's just getting used to the formats. They're pretty straightforward. The second part is essay writing 2 essays, I think in the term as well. And it's just practicing essay writing too, which is a pretty key skill for humanities students anyways. So I would say, at least what I did was focus on the first part. The second part, essay writing, is something that humanities students should naturally enjoy, I suppose. So practicing is key, I suppose. There's loads of past papers online. It's not that hard.
Hi, so someone's asked, did you have to do the Cambridge Law Test or the LNAT? And if so, how was it and how did you prepare? So I did both because I had to do the Cambridge Law Test for Cambridge, but a few of the other unis I applied to needed the LNAT. And so they're slightly different in the sense that with the LNAT, you've got 2 sections. So you've got a multiple choice section and a essay section, and they're both timed. And so I'd say the most helpful thing you could do for the first section is sort of reading a lot of current affairs articles, because what are they looking for in that is sort of your ability to sort of critically think about articles and sort of taking the information. So I'd say that helps. And as for the second half, I think the sort of reading current affairs articles helps as well, because then you sort of have something you can talk about in case it might come up as a question, but also it helps you to sort of think about how you might structure an argument yourself. Also actually going on the website, for like the LNAT, they have like practice sort of papers that you can do with the mark schemes for the multiple choice section. And also you can just sort of practice it timed by sort of downloading it, and then you can sort of practice timed ones at home so you can get a bit better with timing, because I know I found that a bit difficult. As for the Cambridge Law Test, you'll get like an essay question, which will sort of vaguely be related to sort of law, but it's sort of quite accessible because they're looking more about how you think and less about sort of, I don't know how much you know about the topic. So it's more just like, how would you sort of rationally think this sort of question through? They're not looking at your legal knowledge necessarily. So I'd say, yeah, generally it's just sort of doing as much reading about current affairs as you can help, and maybe just practicing, because if you can practice, that helps in terms of the timing and also just knowing how you structure things.
The next question we got is, I'm applying to Oxford for law and Spanish. how does paying for a year abroad work if I would like to do this course, which has one? So I'm kind of the opposite of what you asked. I go Cambridge and I do HSPS, but I have a friend at Cambridge who does MML, which is modern and medieval languages, I think, and he is planning on doing it, was planning on doing a year abroad. And I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure there is a bursary scheme or a travel bursary that you can apply for, which can, take the load off of finances, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm not sure if that's too helpful, but
I'm unmuted. Just to add to that, so more widely within both universities, there are multiple channels for financial support. The biggest one is the bursary at each university, which is income tested based on your household income before you arrive. But you have got within colleges some grants and some support, and it does depend on the college. Sometimes there's for slightly different things, but some will have support for a year abroad. Unfortunately, on this call, yeah, as Katie said, we don't actually have any languages students, but certainly we've had some in the previous Q&As, and we will have some going forwards. So yeah, we can also make a note, and we'll see if we can actually get together a panel of language students, and they'll be perfectly positioned to answer that. Okay, I think Sam, did you want to mention about law?
So in terms of like law at Cambridge, at the moment they have the Erasmus. I don't really know what's going on with that in terms of the future necessarily, but so you can do like a year abroad, and you can also, I think I wouldn't know much about like the finance of that, in the sense, but I think I don't think it's any more expensive than like Cambridge. I think I've heard something, but I'm not gonna say it because I'm not definitely sure. But in terms of like the Erasmus, you've also got things you can do in terms of like exchange programs, because I did one of those this year, but only for like over the holidays. So I did like an exchange program with a university in Madrid for a week. So I was in Madrid for a week, and then they did a week here, and that was sort of sponsored by the Law Society. So there are sort of ways you can do stuff abroad within law. Just because I noticed they asked about law and Spanish at Oxford, but obviously I don't know so much about Oxford. Yeah.
So the next question we had was, how early do you have to start specialising in courses? So in HSPS, we don't necessarily start specialising in first year, but you can start to tailor your course to what you want. So you can choose to drop. So you have to take at least three of the main four. So out of politics, anthropology, international relations, and sociology, you have to take at least three of those, but you can choose to opt out of one of those and take another paper. So that could be like psychology or something like that. And then in second and third year is when you start actually specialising. So from next year, I'm going on to do anthropology and religious studies, and you can really start to tailor it down into joint track or straight track. And then in third year, you specialise again into what you want to do.
So English is actually a bit weird in that you don't have any choice in the papers you take until you get to third year. But having said that, the papers that you do are generally period papers. That means they cover a specific period of time, maybe a century or so. And what that means is you have a massive amount of choice within those papers. So at my college, for example, we don't get essay titles. We just get a reading list, and you can choose what you would like to write about and which authors you'd like to write about from that period. And it's not until third year where you choose specific papers and specialise much more.
So we've been asked, what are the styles of teaching for humanities? And so my course is split into studio work, which is coursework, and then my lecture courses. So for my studio work, I have tutorial sessions. So we have studio tutors who are practicing architects and academics, and they come in on studio days and talk to you one-to-one about your work, and you have the opportunity to talk through it with them and get feedback on it. And then for the lecture side of the course, we obviously have lectures a few times a week where obviously someone stands up and just presents. And then once a week as well, I have a supervision with my director of studies. So my director of studies is the person in charge of my the supervisions and the kind of ensuring that I have the knowledge on the lecture side of the course. And so there's two of us and my director of studies, and we talk over the lectures from that week and do readings to bring to those supervisions to discuss as well.
So we've had a question about whether you can apply in your gap year, and the answer is yes. It was exactly what I did. As I alluded to before, I had no idea what subject I wanted to do when I left school. So I did a gap year, and on results day decided to apply to Oxford for English. And actually, I think it made my application much easier because I wasn't doing A-levels, so I had much more time to read and prepare for it. And then I had an amazing year after that and went traveling. So would highly recommend the gap year. And I do think it makes the application process easier.
So just to add, going back to the earlier question about styles of teaching, so generally most of the teaching is done through what are called tutorials at Oxford or supervisions at Cambridge with small groups discussing sort of an essay that's been written during the preceding week and based on reading that you've done independently. But then you also have lectures which happen a couple of times a week, as Casper said, and then it's also the case that it can vary with some modules. So I found that for my economics, there are a few classes a term sometimes, and the tutorial groups tend to be slightly larger than for history, where it's more one-on-one. And also, if you choose when you're choosing very small modules for history, where there might only be 10 or 15 people doing the module sort of later on in your course, then that will be taught through some classes alongside the tutorials and lectures as well.
And so for the moment, we've just been going through some of the questions submitted in advance. But certainly if you guys in the live chat have got more questions, please keep sending them in because, yeah, everybody here is more than happy to talk about them, even if they seem fairly basic or fairly simple things about the university. And so what we'll do is while we're waiting for more questions to come in, we're just going to go through some other things that we were asked in previous Q&As. But certainly if there's something on your mind, just give us a shout.
So the next question we have is how many books do you have to read / is there a lot of reading? So for Hsps, the reading lists are normally broken down into core readings, and there's normally about 1 or 2, and they're kind of what you're expected to read for each essay. And there are supplementary readings that if you're really interested in a topic or you just have extra time that you'd like to put into reading, those were what you do. But aside from the core readings, it's kind of up to you how much you read, depending on how much time you have and how much interest you have.
To add to that, for law, it's not just books. So we might have maybe 1 or 2 sort of core textbooks that we'll get set sections of for various supervisions, which are sort of small group teaching. And so we'll read maybe sections of those books just for a background to the topic, but quite a lot of the time our reading is more case law. So they'll set us various like lists of cases, and there'll be sort of compulsory ones that you really need to read in order to understand that topic of law, and then sort of ones that you can read in addition to that help with sort of more niche areas that you might get in some of the questions. So how much you read depends on whether or not you want to go beyond just the core reading again. But yeah, you've got more cases, I say, in law than books sometimes.
We've had a question about whether the application process is different for internationals, and in my experience, it's pretty much the same. I'm European, so that might be different for overseas applicants, but I think it's the same. Also through UCAS, and you're still expected to provide predicted grades and to sit the admissions exams, which at least in Portugal, and I know in many European countries, they do offer those exams in your country, so you don't need to go to Britain to take those exams. In terms of interviews, I think if you're European, you're expected to come to Oxford, at least for the interviews. I'm not sure how it is at Cambridge. But I think that for some overseas students, you can do the admissions interviews over Skype maybe. I'm not sure. And maybe now with COVID and everything, perhaps situation's slightly different, but that was my experience at Oxford. Someone from overseas or Cambridge might have a slightly different one, but I expect that the process is pretty much the same for internationals and for home students.
So the next question we got is, did anything surprise you about your interview? And the one thing that surprised me was that there's no expectation for you to know anything about your course really specifically. They just really want to hear the way you think. So it's not about what you know, it's about how you express what you do know. So I was lucky enough that I did A-level sociology, but there's no expectation that you've done these subjects at A-level at all, or that you've done any. I mean, it's great if you do extra reading and you're prepared, but there's no expectation for you to know anything. So don't worry about rocking up and potentially not knowing anything about politics, because like I didn't really, but it's really not a big deal. It's really about expressing yourself and just thinking out loud and letting them know how you think and how you argue and how you understand the world, really.
And a point I just want to add on that. So with Cambridge, I don't know what Oxford do actually, but with Cambridge, you fill out this thing called the SAQ at a similar time of the application on that. So a disclaimer, I'm a science student, but I think it depends very much on certain subjects, and quite often you'll say about the sort of things you've studied, because obviously people have different courses, and the interviewers will know if you haven't studied something before versus somebody who has had an exam on it for the A-levels, then there's going to be that difference in knowledge. And so I think they do try and be aware of that different people will know certain things. But the flip side is, say if you've mentioned something in your personal statement, they probably expect that you know that you're willing to talk about it. So it can differ between subjects and also between people.
I'd say also in terms of interviews, I was quite surprised at like how friendly and sort of conversational some of the interviewers were. So like one of mine, when we were sort of going to the interview room, started talking about like the umbrellas that the college had because it was raining. And so like they're not necessarily as intimidating as you might think, and actually like sometimes. So yeah.
So we've also had a question asking about whether we would recommend sort of doing joint honours subjects rather than single honours, and whether that's more work. So I mean, I really enjoyed it because I was really interested in both of the subjects that I'm currently studying, and also I've been surprised by how many places there are where they can intersect during the course and you're able to bring the two things you're studying together. And I would say in terms of the workload, there's not an overall increase in the amount of work you have to do if you're doing joint honours, but I found especially doing a smaller joint honours course, the workload can be less evenly spread over the course of the year. So you can have some terms which are a relatively light workload and some terms relatively higher workload. And then also, which is something you can deal with, but it just takes a bit more thought. And then also in terms of planning modules, again, it takes a bit more thought if you're joint honours to make sure that everything's even and works out.
Good stuff. So those have covered some of the other questions that we've had coming up quite often before. I don't think there's any more live questions for now, so we'll move on to the next part and then slowly begin to wrap up. Certainly, if you think of anything as we're doing this, feel free to ask. And also, if there's anything which isn't completely related to humanities, but you want to know about, again, just ask us because we can cover it in a future Q&A. So in the next part, each person on the call is just going to talk about one thing that they used as a resource when they were applying that they found really useful.
Yeah, so for me, in applying for PPE, I think one of the basic things is just keeping up to date with current affairs and politics. And the second thing is probably practicing for the TSA, as you've mentioned. I don't know if they're plugging the link, but yeah, that's it.
So for HSPS, I found I really liked like YouTube vloggers who used to do their like day in the life of Cambridge. So my favorite was Ipsmo because he did HSPS in first year, even though he did change to psychology in second year, but I found he was a really good example of a state school student going to Cambridge, not being a typical background, but just still having a great time and like document everything they did at Cambridge. And then the second one I had was for preparing for the course, just the HSPS paper guides, which you can find on the HSPS website. And they might be slightly out of date, but they do give you an idea of like core readings. And if you just want to look at like what you might be interested in and just like explore that before you've rocked up, that's a really good idea.
So for English, I don't think there's anything more particularly you can do than read as much as possible. But the key thing is, I would say, is read what you're interested in. Don't just read books or poems that are really hard and complicated, because they're hard and complicated. Choose a niche if you want and go for it. Make sure you've read all the stuff in your personal statement and also practicing the ELAT. And I think the link went up yesterday.
Law, I sort of looked at this website called McBride's Guides. And so they have sort of suggested reading lists on there and some article links that you can sort of follow with a link to like the various topics you might do in the various year groups. And also sometimes it's just nice to like visit your local court as well, because that's something quite easy to do if you've just got a local court and you can just sit in and watch what they're doing to see if you enjoy that. So in my case, because I live in London, I could go to like the Old Bailey, which is quite big for a local court. And so I found it really interesting. I mean, at times I think it can get like, I think it depends on when you're sort of watching it, because like some cases can be really interesting, some can be sort of less interesting, but it sort of helps you sort of work out if you find sort of law and sort of that element of law more interesting. And it can also help you in terms of like careers later on.
And I just want to add a comment on that. If you don't have a court nearby, again, that's fine. They don't, with both universities, they're aware not everybody has access to the same facilities. And so they won't use that as a criteria for your particular application. And with many of these things, I don't know about law specifically, but often just simply looking at YouTube or things in a local library are very easy and free ways to find a lot of resources to expose yourself to stuff like that.
So I was applying for history and economics, having not studied economics in any way before. So I found it quite useful just to look at some, there was a particular series of crash course economics videos on YouTube, which just to sort of make me confident that I'd be interested in the subject and to give me sort of a basic grounding in what was going on. So that's what I looked at.
So for architecture, I found it quite hard to find kind of useful resources. I looked at some for the portfolio side. You've got to submit a portfolio. I think the best thing to do is just try and find examples online. There used to be some for King's College, Cambridge, but I think they might have removed them. But I'm sure there's other examples of portfolios people have applied with. And then also just reading articles or books around things you're interested in. As Laura said, don't try and read like particular ones that you think are going to impress anybody. Just read what you're interested in, or find what you're interested in and then read more about it. And then when you get to an interview stage, that'll really come across that you've got a niche or a particular area that you find interesting.
Thank you all so much. And we did have a question while we were doing that coming in about saying effectively, will interviews be online because of Cambridge saying lectures will be online? So there's two things I want to clarify about this. First one, interviews, we're not sure. I don't believe it's been announced yet. And both universities, they will say as early as possible on their admissions websites. So that's going to be the first place you will find the answer for that. They also have both universities again have a specific COVID-19 section of their websites. And that's, I mean, as students, that's where we get the latest information. And they also have information for offer holders. And I'm not sure, but I believe they have information for prospective students. So that's the place to look. And Tommy will also post those in the live chat. And then the other thing to clarify, so Cambridge have said lectures will be online, but they are still hoping that elements of the university will be in person. And I think this has been lost in a lot of the news articles at the moment. So particularly the supervisions, the smaller teaching sessions you had, they're still thinking about if they can do those in person, and other sort of activities in the departments. But again, I mean, part of this is we just don't know what the situation will look like come October, November. So it's a bit of a waiting game still. On that note, we are going to wrap up here. Thank you so much all for coming and your questions. We had quite really interesting questions coming in. Tommy will post some links in the YouTube chat, how you can stay in touch with us. The key channels is going to be Instagram, where we're inside.uni, Twitter, we're inside_uni, Facebook, we're InsideUni, and we've on all of those channels, we've got the same logo as we do on the YouTube channel, so quite easy to find. And the most important thing is insideuni.org is our website, where we have a lot of information compiled from many different students. We've also got a Google form, so if there's any questions you've thought of outside of the Q&A, then feel free to submit questions for future sessions on the form, and Tommy will also be posting that on the chat. And yeah, keep an eye out for future events. Going forwards, the two we've got in mind are, we're going to do one for Scottish students, one for Welsh students, but we have all sorts planned, so keep your eyes open. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, and see you soon. Bye. Okay, we are no longer live.